I am Miranda Russell. I am a current student at Mid-America Christian University. I am in the counseling psychology program and I'm studying to be a licensed alcohol and drug therapist. The course that I'm currently taking is alcohol and drug addictions, and this week we are studying group therapy. It is a very effective way to treat those that have addiction issues. So I'm going to be going over this video is to go over the 4 structural stages of group therapy. So I'm going to start off by going over those 4 stages. The first stage is the initial stage, and that's when the group comes together, and it's called a forming stage. Lichtenberg and Knox, there was a study in 1991, and they referred to the first stage as a forming stage. That's when the group members are generally coming in, getting to know each other. They have some anxiety. It's a bit quiet. They are having some discussions, but they're superficial. They're not going very deep. It's kind of small talk. They're looking for direction and leadership from the therapist. The therapist will start off with the first skill or intervention, and it's called listening and attending. They should be genuine, kind, respectful, trustful, non-judgmental, while attending and listening to what the clients are talking about. The therapist will intervene when needed, but I would think the therapist would need to start off with a brief introduction of their self, give a little background information about their self, and talk about the expectations for confidentiality. There was another study done by Davis in 1980 that said that when confidentiality was covered in group therapy, it needed to be covered at the first session in order to relay those expectations to group members and for confidentiality to actually be successful, and group members will know that they don't need to share any of that information outside of the group. Confidentiality cannot be enforced in group therapy, but it does need to be discussed, and hopefully the members will respect that for each other. While the group leader or the therapist has this discussion, she also needs to talk about some common things that are common among group members in these very first sessions. They don't know what to expect, so they are apprehensive. A little bit of anxiety is going on because they don't know how they're going to be accepted in the group, their own identity, how it will be perceived from other group members. They don't know who has power in the group. They're assuming that it might be the leader or the therapist, but they're not quite sure. So the leader or the therapist will talk about that. Another common thing that they are thinking about or experiencing is the level of intimacy within the group. They're probably not going to be comfortable sharing intimate details about their life with group members that they don't know. So when the therapist will talk about that at the opening session, it'll relieve some of their anxieties and let them know that first, by expressing confidentiality, that they can be more open to share with these other group members, and that they're all there and kind of having some of the same problems in their life. So they would be comfortable sharing. Another skill that can be used by the therapist in this initial stage would be paraphrasing. So what I concluded was, after each group member shares a bit about theirself, that the therapist can paraphrase what each has said in order to show the group members that the therapist is listening to them, that they are caring, accepting, respectful, and they're open to listen. And they will try to instill hope for everyone within the group, and that gives a good vibe in the group, so that others will want to share about their own things in life. The next phase in the structural building of a group would be the transition phase or the storming phase. Lichtenberg and Knox called that second phase the storming stage. In this stage, it's characterized by a little bit of chaos, maybe some conflict where the group members are starting to struggle for dominance and control and power within the group. They might take jabs at the leader, but the leader needs to remain calm and non-defensive, while she also encourages them to continue on dealing with their issues, and she models healthy behaviors within the group. Some skills that can be done by the therapist during that second stage is the reflecting of feelings. What I put in my notes was, after a member has spoken and shown some feelings, the therapist can remain sympathetic and reflect what they perceive that the client is feeling in their own words. That will help to build trust between the therapist and that client or the group as a whole, and let them know that the therapist is listening, understands how they're feeling, and is non-judgmental of them. This will encourage the group members that they can share, that it's a safe place that they can share their feelings with others. Another skill I put in here was listening and summarizing. So at the end of the session, the therapist can summarize like what information was covered, what feelings were expressed by the members as a whole, and doing this will model to the clients or the group members that the therapist has listened the whole time and that they are genuine in how they care for them and help move them forward, even though they might have been kind of personally attacked during that, that the counselor knows how to handle that. The next stage is the working stage. Lichtenberg and Knox called this the norming stage. This is the third stage of group therapy. This is where the work starts to happen. The conflict ends, and the group members start to trust each other and actually start talking about their problems and what's going on in their life, and they're working together. No more fighting for control or power within the group. Let's see. They're working, I guess, with each other instead of against each other. And also in this stage, the therapist encourages the group members to take what they've learned inside of the group and take it outside and practice those things, like within their family and their jobs and things like that. So they can practice those new learned skills and behaviors outside of the group. Another skill that the therapist could use with the group during this time is listening and probing. So after a group member discloses something personal about themselves, the therapist might think that more information can be learned about that experience or the feelings that the client is expressing. So they would just ask an open-ended question to clarify. That will invoke the group member to talk about that more, using open-ended questions that don't have the answers of yes and no. So that group member would have to answer that question, and it'll invoke them to think about it in maybe another way of expressing their feelings towards that, or seeing another, a deeper way of understanding what happened. Another skill the counselor can use in this stage is counselor self-disclosure. The counselor can actually find a time. They need to be kind of discreet about picking the time when to self-disclose in a group to make sure that it's for the client's benefit and not their own. But they could listen for a time when they've had a similar experience in life and share just a tad about a self-disclosure to let the client know that they've shared a similar experience or a feeling in the past. That lets the group know that the therapist is actually relatable, that they're, a human being and have some of the same common feelings, sometimes maybe an issue or an experience in the past. It helps to build trust and rapport within the group. And maybe there might be a timid client that doesn't really open up and talk much, and this might help them to feel more at ease, that they can open up and share more feelings or experiences within the group when they see that, not just the other group members, but the counselor, the therapist is there to do the same and model that behavior with them. That takes me to the final stage, structural stage of group, and that would be, it's called the final stage, it's the last stage, and Lichtenberg and Knox called this the performing stage. This is where they feel that clients are actually able to perform what they've learned in group and take it outside and can use it on their own in their everyday life. A lot of things are happening in this final stage of group. The group is coming together and ending as a group. It's called termination. Some clients are going to be comfortable with termination if they've learned a lot and have used those skills that they've learned outside of the group at home and are comfortable in doing so. Those that have not done that are very apprehensive. Maybe they've not felt supported before. Maybe this is the first time that they've ever felt supported by a group, that they've been accepted. And so those people are going to have a harder time with termination of group. It's up to the therapist to talk about those feelings during group therapy. Because ending group therapy is, it's imperative that it comes to an end. Everything comes to an end, and clients need to talk their feelings out about that as well. So another skill I had in here is the listening and confrontation that the therapist can use. They may need to confront a group member that's saying that they're ready for the group to be over. However, their feelings that they're expressing is contradictory. Say that when they first walked in, the therapist overheard them talking to another client or group member, and they were very mad and saying they couldn't believe that this was the last session. So in confronting that client about what they said, that they're ready for group to be over, what they're saying and what they're expressing to the other group members is not the same. And so the therapist might just ask the client to be honest in how they feel about that being their last session, and they can explore those feelings further. But it's just asking them to be genuine and congruent with how they feel and what they're expressing in their actions. Another intervention to use in this last stage with the clients is listening and interpreting. And interpreting is a little bit different than it actually sounds. So when a group member expresses, say, their disappointment with the termination of group therapy, the therapist can use interpreting to help them find new ways of looking at termination. So the therapist might say, for example, do you think that you're disappointed with the group ending because you have never experienced support and living, a healthy lifestyle before? Maybe they've never been supported by their own family in living without an addiction. Maybe they've not had that outer support before, and so just interpreting that for the client and letting them find another way to think about it. You know, termination is going to come within the group, and they can find other avenues of support. A lot of people do AA or NA outside of this group therapy, and that is an ongoing group that the client can continue to feel supported in their recovery. So anyway, that concludes my lesson on the 4 structural stages of group therapy. Thank you, and please have grace with me today.